The Elements of Friendship, Book 1, Harmony, by Amaris Vegeland. Chapter 15, A Gentle Soul. Spike cried out in terror, his claws clutching tightly around Twilight's neck. She could feel his heart beating against the back of her head, while her own heart pounded away somewhere inside her throat. The headless horse raised one of her cloven hoofs slowly, so similar to her coat in color and texture that the end of her coat in the beginning of her hoof was indistinguishable. She prepared to paw at the ground as dark black smoke coming from her neck continued to writhe and twist. Twilight was marginally more aware of it than her 5 pony friends, but they were also terrified by the appearance of the headless horse. They were bordering on physical and mental paralysis. The arrival of Nightmare Moon had instilled similar feelings, but she was at the very least equine enough to have a face and voice. Headless Horse lived up to her name and the lack of a face for them to make a connection with a voice for it to learn to fear. She was a great terror in the shadows of equestrian society, where the first dozen-fold victims of Nightmare Moon's hunger haunted the undersides of the beds of many fillies and colts, where the nameless prisoners of Tartarus saw freedom, where any eldritch beast imaginable could take root in a pony's mind and gnaw away at their sanity. But now that it was known that she, the Headless Horse, was a beast which truly existed in their real world, it called into question just what undiscovered beasts or horrific cryptids dismissed as fantasy truly did lurk behind one when one turned around at the sound of footsteps, or a shuddering breath while alone. "Girls?" Twilight quivered, hoping against hope that the Headless Horse could not hear her, but daring not to take the chance. "When I give the signal—"
"What's the signal?"
quivered Fluttershy. The Headless Horse silently reared up, her forehooves kicking as though to cave in the lavender unicorn skull, and Twilight took action. Her pink horn flashed pink, and the Headless Horse soared into the air and levitated in a pink glimmer shimmer some 50 hooves off the plateau, its hooves and tail flailing about in a frenzy as it reached blindly for something solid to set foot upon. "Run!" Straight Twilight, Spike's claws clinging still tighter as he galloped at full speed under the hovering Headless Horse, her 5 friends in close pursuit of Twilight. The whole band beelining down the sloping plateau, away from Labyrinth. "I won't be able to keep the Headless Horse up in the air for very long!" she called, back over at the sound of her hooves crunching through snow. "She'll be after us in less than a minute! I know it!" The 5 offered shouts of exclamations of acknowledgement, Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy flying high through the air, while the remaining 3 galloped with all their strength. Ahead of the band, the sloping plateau proved to be greatly treacherous. Though the snow had seen little melting due to the constantly plummeting temperatures of a continent trapped in eternal night, it was still water at its core. So, traction proved to be a challenge to a band of 4 galloping mares while attempting to make their way down the plateau as quickly and safely as possible. Twilight almost considered melting the snow with a heat spell, but quickly decided against it. "With the temperatures as they are," she thought with a sudden shiver, "the melted snow would freeze as ice, and that would just make all of our lives that much harder." Pinkie Pie darted ahead of her, suddenly galloping backwards. She looked very worrisome.
Twilight, have you been running backwards lately?"
If Pinkie had asked Twilight this question in the first fortnight they had known each other, Twilight would have called the pink earth pony insane as quickly as reading a book. As she had seen Pinkie Pie so frequently ignoring logical action by running backwards at that time, it was all too likely she would have winked out back to Canterlot and turned herself into an insane asylum on the spot. But now, knowing Pickamene the Diane Pie, Twilight reined in any feelings of disbelief at a pony galloping backwards and replied calmly, "No, I haven't! Why?" Pinkie pointed the hoof back, forward to herself, and shouted in alarm, "Because that thing hasn't!" Glancing behind herself, Twilight's heart lurched. The Headless Horse was hot on their tails, almost literally. It had broken free of Twilight's magical hold already, and clearly had no intent of dealing with them mercilessly. The black smoke emerging from her neck stump billowed behind her, but not enough to expose her severed spinal cord or trachea. "Twilight, Khartoum here is gaining on us!" Rainbow Dash called out to Twilight, her serious eyes creased and worried.
"Don't you worry, Dassy, I'm on it!"
replied Pinkie Pie, reaching into her own mane with her forehost as he continued to run backwards on her hind legs, drawing out a flashlight that was clearly too large to contain in her impossibly frizzy mane, and pointing said flashlight at the headless horse, repeating it, switching it on and off, and saying, "Pew pew 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 pew," as he said it. It had absolutely no effect, so far as Twilight could tell. Having turned her head back to where she was galloping, she could still make out the headless horse's soft footfalls on the snow behind him. Piggy discarded her flashlight out the edge of the plateau on her left.
I don't get it! Why didn't it work?
Piggy produced from her mane a bubble-blowing wand that was as easily as long as her torso, swinging it back and forth frantically. Bubbles as big as her head flew out from the end of her wand and floated past the rapidly galloping mare and into the headless horse's approaching form. Still no effect.
What's going on? Piggy guessed. None of my party tricks are working!
Well, that's because all brainless here don't have no eyes, Piggy! Applejack snapped. You gotta use something that don't involve her eyes! Piggy's eyes widened in realization.
Oh, okay.
Before she began to rustle about in her mane. Not her nose either! Interjected Applejack. Discarding a canister of flapping gas, which bounced off the edge of the plateau, Piggy smiled brightly as he said,
Uh-huh!
and produced from within her voluminous mane a comically oversized, bright red boxing horseshoe at the end of a pair of extension scissors. She took each end of the extension scissors in a forehoof and brought them together, causing the boxing glove to extend toward the pursuer at a surprisingly dramatic speed. It clobbered the headless horse straight in the middle of her neck, the spectre tumbling neck over hooves and, because Piggy was slightly to the left of the headless horse's forward momentum, plummeting over the edge of the plateau. Piggy let out a cheer and returned to her quadrupedal gallop, albeit still galloping backwards. The remainder of the party slowed down as well, taking a deep breath as they began to recollect their thoughts.
That was definitely a thing, Pinkie Pie,
Twilight said heavily, but with a smile on her face nonetheless.
Piggy giggled. Don't mention it, Twilight. I just don't want my friends being sad because the ghostie is chasing them.
Rainbow Dash did a double loop-de-loop with a broad smile on her muzzle. That was pretty sweet, Pinkie Pie. I mean, you almost hit me at Fireside with those bubbles of yours, but that external horseshoe... This Cerulean Pegasus began to choke on her laughter.
That was so priceless!
Spike chuckled heartily for Twilight's back.
Yeah, that whole thing was amazing! How do you get so much stuff in your mane?
Pinkie Pie shook her head with a sad smile.
No can do, Spiky. If I told you the secret, it wouldn't be funny anymore.
She looked at Rainbow Dash with a fond look.
But it makes me smile knowing that I made you smile, Dashy. I just love seeing my friends smile. Of course, I love to make anybody smile.
Rady's eyes shone.
You really do have a heart of gold, Pinkie Pie. I just couldn't see it before because of your raucousness.
She smiled.
I know. I shall make you a dress, for your tarts, upon our defeat of Nightmare Moon.
Pinkie Pie's eyes widened to the size of their plates.
Really? Do you think it would look good with lollipops on it?
Rarity hesitated.
Then our balloons, our candy, our streamers! Streamers on a dress.
Before Pinkie could elaborate any further, a shuffling of snow at the edge of the plateau brought any conversational thoughts to a dead halt. 7 pairs of eyes swiveled slowly toward the cliff, where a black, cloven hoof dug itself into the snow and earth. It was joined soon by another cloven hoof, and together they pulled out the shadowy form of the headless horse, its long tail swishing furiously, and the black smoke of its neck swirling murderously. They did not even take a glance at one another. In the span of a single heartbeat, Twilight and her band began to gallop down the plateau in earnest, with their headless adversary once more in hot pursuit.
She fell off a freaking cliff!
Rainbow Dash shouted. What's it going to take to kill her?
She's already lost her head!
Applejack replied breathlessly. I don't reckon killing her is going to be so easy!
Oh yeah!
Was all the Rainbow Pegasus mare said before she spun around in midair, so she faced the headless horse, took a big flap of her wings that produced a miniature twister that cycled madly toward the headless horse.
Try to does that, brainless!
She boasted. The headless horse then demonstrated, to the dismay of them all, that she was nothing if not crafty. She took a leap into the air, not to clear the twister, but to travel through its center. The instant that she left the ground, She began to spin wholly in the opposite direction of Rainbow Dash's twister. An empty and fell light began to shine from the scars on the headless horse's flanks, and the twister dispelled itself. The headless horse, landing no worse for the wear, it continued to gallop unimpeded. "Okay, that was pretty cool," Rainbow Dash muttered, before facing forwards once more. Applejack sighed roughly. "So I can handle this myself, don't I?" she grumbled, nosing her shell cell open and producing her trusty lasso. "Finally get to make use of this for it," she thought to herself, slinging the looped end of the lasso toward one of the headless horse's forehooves as he prepared to place it on the ground mid-gallop. The instant her cloven hoof touched the snow, Applejack snapped her head in the other direction, tightening the lasso around the headless horse's forearm just above the knee. Before even a dozen of a second had passed, and before the headless horseman could even appropriately respond to what had happened, Applejack catapulted herself to the side as her lasso foe continued to move forward. Using her prior momentum to her advantage, Applejack managed a complete circle around the headless horse as he began prying the rope off her bag. Applejack's eyes flashed green, and the headless horse found her hoofs suddenly adhering to the snowy earth as though entangled with roots. A twitch of Applejack's head, and the headless horse began to spin around, the rope winding itself tightly around the headless horse's legs as the decapitated mare struggled fruitlessly to free herself. So death's rope-work layer, Applejack crossed her left foreleg in the front of her right and over the headless horse. "Hi, dressed it like a turkey." "And the award for most badass member of the main six for this chapter goes to Applejack." I want to give that award to other members of the main six, but I think you people can already guess who's been having the most awesome awards lately, she said smugly as her lassoed enemy failed on the ground. "Now, we just gotta wait till she's too tired to hold us down."
"Nice work, Applejack,"
smiled Twilight.
"But why would you dress up a turkey?"
Fluttershy asked frightfully, her shining eyes widened with horror.
"They're really such nice birds."
"I weren't talking about the turkey bird," replied Applejack. "It's some kind of monkey turtle kind of animal, like a monkey with a sore turtle hair. They could crush a pony's skull if they fell out of a tree, and they love climbing trees, so you gotta dress them up." Twilight arched her head to the side.
"Some ponies have insisted it should be called the mantle instead, but for some odd reason it doesn't stick. It doesn't make sense."
"What the conquest was going through the minds of those times ponies," Applejack murmured. "It just smells like help when ponies try to talk about turkey birds and turtle monkey creatures." The sound of something tearing came to their ears, and seemed to be coming from the headless horse. Fearing the worst, they looked toward her. The dark black smoke from her throat had coalesced and solidified into an ebony sickle, shaped exactly like a crescent moon, and had sliced through Applejack's lasso as though it were made of wet tissue. "Oh, sweet baby Celestia, what does it take to kill this thing?" The headless horse effortlessly shook off the shredded bits of rope, standing back to her full height, and leveling her jet-black sickle over her back, the blade glimmering in the starlight. Twilight screamed in frustration, her mane and tail bursting spontaneously into flames, her coat burning a pale yellow, and her eyes shining a bright red, as she bellowed in Germain. Her Alicorn lit up a bright pink as he gritted her teeth together. Before the headless horse could so much as take a step in their direction, it was engulfed in a flash of pink light, disappearing with the light. Twilight heaved a deep sigh of relief, her mane and tail returning to their normal non-plasmic state, her eyes changing back to purple, and coat reverting to lavender. Her friends, who had taken several steps back from her incensed state, began to take tentative hoof steps toward her.
"Twilight,"
Fluttershy asked timidly,
"are you all right?"
Taking a deep breath, Twilight gave Fluttershy a somber look. "Sorry you had to see that. I'm very magically powerful, and when I get really mad or frustrated, well, you see what happened," Twilight explained, slipping slightly on a puddle of melted snow water at her hooves. "I've taken to fireproofing almost all my possessions, though it doesn't work on biological life forms," she finished with flat ears. "But, as a dragon, I have naturally fireproof magic all about me," Spike added proudly. Applejack looked on, only mildly more assured. Well, nice swell and all, Sugar Cube, but where did you find that nasty old headless snake? Twilight looked down from the plateau to some point beyond the swamps that were now so much closer to them. I waked the headless horse down to the bottom of the Horseshoe Bay. If she doesn't have a head, she still has to breathe. Logically speaking, still drowned down there. And we'll have one less pursuer. Twilight felt as though some pony was giving her a cross look. Glancing around, she spotted Pinkie Pie, whose blue eyes were currently narrowed at the lavender unicorn. What?
Your coat changing color,
Grumbled the pink party pony.
Why did you get on my case for my coat changing color?
Pinkie's eyes widened in realization before she fell back to her standard explain something mode.
There's a difference to be made between our situations, Pinkie. See, my coat didn't actually change color. It was more like every bit of fur or hair on my body instantly assumed an ionized or plasmic state because of my high thermometrical quotient mixed with my very heated reaction. Basically, it's like all my fur and hair turned into fire.
Pinkie's eyes remained narrowed.
What?
She continued worriedly.
It's not like I'm the first pony who's done it. I mean, Queen Celestia has done it. It's been documented. She lit up with sunfire when... Oh, you don't need to keep flapping your guns, Twilight.
Pinkie beamed suddenly.
I was just wondering if you could do that when we got around to cooking s'mores.
Twilight's jaw opened. It closed involuntarily several times as she processed what had just happened. Finally, she made a chuckling scoff and said,
Sir, we'll see. I'm glad that you're feeling better now, Twilight.
Fluttershy said softly. So am I, Spike said with his arms around Twilight's neck. And you got that nasty headless horse off our tails. That was awesome! Twilight smiled.
Thanks, Spike.
Rarity looked down at Horseshoe Bay pensively. Something on your mind, Rare? Applejack asked.
Well,
Rarity replied.
I was just wondering, how did such a devastatingly frightened man lose her head anyway?
Well, it was on a dark and stormy night, began Rainbow Dash, waving her forelegs ominously with a devil's smirk on her face. Twilight's eyes narrowed. Not every scary story begins on a dark and stormy night, Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash cast an irrelevant glare at the lavender unicorn. Well, they should, because that's awesome! Twilight sighed.
I'll explain what I'm sure is the most widely tale of the headless horse the rest of the way down the plateau.
And then her entire family was never heard from again, Twilight finished.
And that's the tale of the headless horse. At least, that's how Mom and Vati told it.
Just about every pony whom Twilight had been speaking to looked very white at the conclusion of Twilight's grisly tale. Even Pinkie looked ill at ease, her mane and tail actually uncurling very slightly.
I didn't like that version of the story, she said in a shockingly timid voice. I prefer the one my mom and dad told me.
Spike, who had taken to the ground to try to console Rarity, looked at Pinkie Pie in unease. How did that person's headless horse lose her head? Pinkie's face showed a small smile.
A great big rock fell on her head. Eek!
Fluttershy squeaked in horror.
That's even worse.
Pinkie gave Fluttershy a sympathetic look.
It's what the Pie family's been telling their folks for Father Benjamin can remember. So, it's the one I like.
Fluttershy ran a hoof through her mane.
My mommy always told me that the headless horse never had a head. I feel bad for her.
Beg your pardon, Fluttershy, Applejack interjected, before briefly turning to Rainbow Dash. Now, yours too, Rainbow. But that big old snake in the grass was trying to do his laying. How can you feel bad for her? Rainbow Dash looked off to some point past Applejack and Fluttershy, trying not to make contact with either pony. I'll be honest, I don't get it either, but I'm not going to argue. Celestia's knows I've been getting too short with Flutters this whole journey.
I don't think any pony here wants to argue, darling,
Rarity added.
Still, it's a curious notion, Fluttershy.
The butter-yellow Pegasus sank down to the ground, rubbing her four hooves together ruefully.
I don't know why. I just don't think any pony should have no head. And I feel bad for her, even though she tried to take us away, because I don't know why. I really don't. I just feel bad that this is all she knows. Chasing, hunting.
Fluttershy gulped fearfully.
Trying to find a head that fits.
Rainbow Dash put a foreleg around Fluttershy's shoulder, and the pair smiled warmly at each other.
Well, I think we can all relax now,
Twilight said with an attempt at a smile. Because we made it down to Plateau! Sure enough, they had left Labyrinth and the cliff overlooking the hayseed swamps, Horseshoe Bay, and the Baltimore Long Island, long behind. Less than 2 dozen paces ahead, the plateau's edge came level with the edge of hayseed swamps themselves. The snow was deeper here, but powdery, and the flurries had stopped about halfway through Twilight's tail of the headless horse. Flowers feebly poked their heads out from under the snow, their petals drooping miserably and their leaves shriveled. Some distance not too far away brought on the appearance of a modest forest, topped with snow as if it were a pastry sprinkled with powdered sugar.
Where's the road?
Asked Fluttershy. Applejack brought a foreleg above her eyes. I don't see any signs, not one in either direction. Looks like we're way off the beaten path.
Dang it!
Swore Rainbow Dash.
Perhaps we could take shelter in the forest?
Rarity queried.
In that forest?
Fluttershy replied with surprising eagerness.
Maybe there are friendly animals in there, like bunnies and jackalopes and hummingbirds that really hum and buzzards that really buzz and, oh, I can barely contain myself.
I don't know. Twilight pondered aloud. If we go in there, we lose all life in the stars and moon, so it's bound to be exceptionally cold in there, even for these standards. On the other hoof. Rainbow Dash shoved the hoof over Twilight's mouth, loudly sushing her. The cerulean Pegasus' ears were swiveling about in one particular direction, toward the north, toward Horseshoe Bay. Guys, I think we have company. Rainbow Dash intoned grimly, removing her hoof from Twilight's mouth. Twilight did not even need to think twice about what this company could possibly be. Just how tenacious was this headless horse? And what would it take to get it to stop chasing them? Was there nothing they could do to lose or deter it? Twilight contented itself with hastily finishing her prior train of thought. On the other hoof, going in there means it will be harder for any of Nightmare Moon's agents, or any pony else for that matter, to find us! Everybody, into the forest! The band of 7 galloped toward the largest gap in trees with all the speed they could muster. The last one to cross the threshold was Rarity, who cast one terrified glance over her shoulder as she entered the pitch-black forest. An equine figure, tall, slender, and headless, came to a stop on its southwards journey, just at the lowest edge of the plateau. That infernal lavender unicorn had succumbed to her rage and banished her, to the bottom of a freezing body of water. All the water's weight and chill upon her body meant nothing in the face of such humiliation. She would have Twilight Sparkle's blood. Twilight came to a stop, panting. All this galloping constantly to a fatty headless horse was beginning to wear away at her. While Twilight Sparkle never fancied herself a particularly athletic mare, she did like to think that she was fairly capable of a decent gallop every now and again. But these unrelenting encounters with the headless horse were not just wearing away at her mind, but body as well. She almost felt her legs preparing to give out beneath her. She would not be winning any fights if it came down to such. Is every pony here? She asked tentatively. The forest seemed to have an uncanny closeness to it, as though all sounds died a host's length away from her ears. A claw grabbed her leg as she startled in alarm. Mom, it's me! Spike cried out. Blinking, Twilight could just make out the shape of her Drake ward. She lit up her Alicorn, and the trees around her and her son and their friends were illuminated in a pink aura. Yes, all 7 were here. But this forest was as bad as Twilight had feared. Apart from the glow of her horn, it would have been impossible to see anything in this darkness. There was a cold, earthly smell about this place, and the air was very close. Thankfully, the soil was rather dry compared to the outside, fallen leaves crunching at her hooves. Thank the Maker for small blessings, Twilight thought dryly. So, We should be safest in here, right?
Rainbow Dash half-stated, half-asked. Potentially, Twilight replied. But we can't bank on the Headless Horse leaving us be, even if we're in a forest. If anything, he's at an advantage over us, because he doesn't need light to track us down. That's no reason to stay in the dark, though. I don't think I can maintain the light continually if it comes to another confrontation, which it doubtlessly will.
So, let's see you make another sun,
Pinky said brightly. Applejack brightened up noticeably. Yeah, I think Pinky's got a swell idea there. We get light, and you get your mind off the mega light.
Hey, yeah!
Rainbow Dash added. You can really do that, Twi!
Girls, please, settle down.
Rarity cut in.
You must understand that a unicorn's magic has its limits. We don't want to be taxing Twilight so much while she's under such stress and strain.
Twilight gave Rarity a soft and sad smile.
Thank you for thinking of me, Rarity.
But I have another reason to think twice about heliogenesis.
What's the damage?
Asked Rainbow Dash.
Well,
Twilight began. I'm not sure if generating another heliocentric sun will cause the one over Ponyville to dissipate. I don't want them to freeze. Her ears went limp. Her eyes shone with wavering sadness. Especially since my parents are there. Her 5 pony friends looked back and forth at each other uneasily. After several moments, each faced Twilight and turned. Applejack spoke first.
Well, Sugar, I for one reckon that you're better play it safe. I understand that your folks are important to you.
I, for one, would be remiss to imagine my dear little sister Sweetie Belle to be subject of the brunt of the coldness of this dreadful night. Well, if it's okay with you, I wouldn't let Angel Bunny or any of my animal friends get cold. I mean, only if it's okay with you.
Let's face it, it really wouldn't be awesome to let Ponyville freeze.
Ponies need hot-burning oven pastries to keep happy, and it won't be easy to make them if every pony else buys cold that Mr. and Mrs. Cake need to keep their ovens warm, and plants around Ponyville won't grow if your sun disappears, and ponies will fight each other over the fancies and pastries that are left.
Twilight cast a sharp eye at Pinkie Pie for her reasoning, which at first seemed rather innocuous and flaky, but ended a surprising logical antidote for Pinkie Pie.
Spike cleared his throat. You don't think that Rarity could use her magic light to keep you from doing yours all the time, Mom?
Twilight looked down at Spike with a faint imitation of a smile.
That sounds like a good idea, Spike, but we really should ask Rarity first.
The sound of crunching leaves. Twilight's ears perked up. For the pink light, it did not appear that any pony had moved their hooves into any patches of dead leaves. That could mean only one thing.
In a circle, girls!
She hissed. In an instant, each of the 6 mares formed a circle around Spike, each facing outwards, with Twilight and Rarity at diametric opposites from one another, with their alicorns aglow. Pink and periwinkle lights played across each of the passing trees, narrow and broad. It would easily betray any approaching figures, but thus far it did not appear that anything had encroached upon their location. Indeed, the surrounding forest seemed to be entirely devoid of life. Even insects seemed to have vanished, leaving the surroundings deathly silent. Hearts pounding, their eyes strained for the faintest movement between the trees, their ears perked for the quietest sound. Twilight did a slight double-take, with a skip of her heart at the sight of movement, but sighed in relief as she realized it was just a tree swaying in the breeze. Her heart stopped. She could hear no wind. "Girls! Behind me!" she screamed, her alicorn so brightly lit that it glowed almost white. Her friends compiled immediately, the headless horse charging at full speed. In a panic, Twilight shut her eyes, and cast the first spell that came to her mind. The headless horse feared nothing. There was nothing above or below Harmonia that could give her pause. There was nothing that could deter her from her cause. Nothing. Nothing but this. A searing orb of uncommonly bright light floated right at the tip of Twilight Sparkle's alicorn. The act of heliogenesis did what nothing else could do. Not flashlights, bubbles, extendo horseshoes, blinking out into the ocean,
could have possibly evoked fear in the headless horse. Opening her eyes, Twilight found herself agape in astonishment at the recoiling headless abomination. The helioscentric sun hovered, like a shield in between her and her companions and the headless horse. It was as if the light of day was something that was completely unaccustomed to deal with. And it clicked. Twilight smirked at the headless horse. "Skulking around in the dark too long, were you? Well, I'll let you know that Queen Celestia's sun burns in all our hearts, and you could never extinguish it! You could tell that to your queen up at Canterlot. Let them know that we're here, and that the sun is not so easily snuffed out, as long as there are those who want to look toward the dawn!" The quavering headless horse took some steps back, the dark black smoke of its neck twisting about in agony, as it attempted to shrink away from the pseudo-daylight. Filled with vindication, Twilight magically nudged the heliocentric sun closer toward the headless horse, which reared up in terror at the sun, and galloped off into the shadows, between the trees back to the east. There were sighs of relief and tears of joy behind Twilight, as he felt Spike's arms around one of her hind legs. The headless horse was gone. Not vanquished, but as long as he remembered that Twilight Sparkle had the power to generate imitation suns, the headless horse would not be returning to deal with them again anytime soon. "Now that's what I'm talking about!" teared Rainbow Dash. "Thou art the headless horse!" Applejack concurred. Twilight scratched the ground nervously with a cloven hoof. "Well, I'm glad that I've shaken her off, but I'm thinking about Ponyville right now. I'm worried that this new sun here—" She looked to the orb of bright light and heat, floating at her head's height in the small clearing, "has replaced the heliocentric sun over Ponyville." Pinkie Pie popped out from a tree's knothole next to Twilight.
If you're worried, can you just wink out back to Ponyville really quickly and just wink right back here to let us know if the sun's still here, then you need to magically replace it again if it wasn't here, even though you would probably know if it was gone from the sun going out here because the sun brought back there by your magic and Pinkie!" Twilight lightly, but patiently, placing a sapphire hoof over Pinkie's muzzle. "I got what you were saying 410 words ago, and I'll get right on it. Queen Celestia devised a spell to work with an ancillary spell that exposes the points at which the supplementary sun rises, if a supplementary sun is in place." She faced the primal earth pony friend and Mulberry Drake's son. "Applejack, Spike, you two will keep every pony safe."
Applejack smirked. "You can count on us, Twilight." Spike pointed to claw at Twilight sharply. "I won't let you down!" Twilight gave Spike one last squeezing hug before her Alicorn lit, as he plunged into the singularity of a wink-out. "You! Declare yourselves!" 5 mares and a drake turned in shock at an unfamiliar voice. Just at the edge of the circle of the heliocentric sun light were a pair of cloven hooves attached to a brown body with tall, curled antlers. Verity gulped.
"Oh dear."
Twilight emerged into the Saddle Valley, less than a gross paces out of Ponyville, if her calculations correct. She should have been very close to the sun-setting end of the parabolic arc of heliogenesis sun, where it would have been easy to tell if the sun sat below the horizon. The air was cold, and her hooves were almost up to an elbow in patch of snow, but the intricacies of the heliogenesis spell would allow her to tell where it rose and set. The mark was, once the ancillary spell was cast, a golden circle with Queen Celestia's cutie mark floating above it. Gritting her teeth, Twilight laid the correct spell matrices in her Alicorn, bringing forth the ancillary heliogenesis spell. Almost immediately, a patch of exposed grass and earth fewer than a dozen paces ahead to her right began to frost of bright gold, and a shimmering yellow circle with a shining orange radiance emerging around it. Queen Celestia's cutie mark, a stylized image of the sun, which she moved through the cosmic aether. Twilight smiled. This was good news indeed. Now it was time to... "There she is!" Twilight bolted on instinct, glancing up at the skies over Ponyville. Figures in jet-black armor, accented with silvery sharp secateurs, were flying at her with all the speed, some with feathery wings, some with leathery wings. Pale blue eyes glowed with a deadly glow. No doubt these were the Nightmare Guard. Gathering her thoughts, Twilight fell into the indefinitely dense realm between winking out and winking in, emerging back into the heliocentric sunlit forest where her friends had been. It startled at the sound of a tree branch falling, both snapping in a howl of pain. It was not the sort of voice she had heard before.
"Holy Tartarus!"
cried Applejack, rearing back from the source of the noise, which Twilight eyed with fear and pity. It was a deer stag, taller by half than any of them. Even Applejack would have just reached his underbelly. His antlers were tall and curved, but his brown speckled fur was matted, as if by lack of care. He had thick growth of dark brown fur between his antlers. He was presently felled by a large tree branch. One of his hind legs bent at an odd angle, and his ambered eyes were narrowed at the band of ponies around him, with sharp suspicion. "What are you doing in this forest, ponies?" he asked in a surprisingly steady voice, attempting to pull his leg out from under the branch.
Please, don't move your leg too much,
Fluttershy said with fever.
Twilight, Rarity, please use your magic to pull it off.
"Why should they?"
Rainbow Dash groused.
"He charged us and tried to take us out. He deserved this."
Fluttershy gave her special pony a stern gaze.
He might have or might not have, but he still deserves help.
She looked back to her two unicorn friends with a plea in her eyes.
Please.
Sharing a glance between themselves, Twilight and Rarity set about remedying the most basic unicorn spell, levitation. The tree branch glowed pink and periwinkle, floating up and off the stag and depositing itself out of the circle of trees with false sunlight. The stag glanced back and forth between Rarity and Twilight, before speaking slowly. "One of you was not here before. How did you arrive so quickly? Was it pony magic?" Twilight nodded. "I winked in." The stag scowled. "I did not need your help, you know. I am a deer. I could have thrown that branch off easily." Once more, the stag attempted to draw himself up to his hooves, but Fluttershy actually flew up to him and placed forehoofs firmly on his barrel.
Please, you must rest yourself and let us tend to you.
"Why? You ponies intrude into our forest, and I, by my honor as a stag, should see you driven out. How do I know that you are not all beholden to the dark mare?" Rainbow Dash cocked a rainbow eyebrow.
"Really? You find us all standing around this thing?"
She pointed at the heliocentric sun.
"And you think we're working for Nightmare Moon?"
The stag growled. "How do I know that is not the real sun, torn down from the heavens by the dark mare herself? How do I know that you were not all set to the task of guarding it from us light lovers?" "Because," Twilight explained, "the sun is not that small. The sun is roughly a gigagross miles across, and approximately a gross of a gigagross miles away from our planet."
Besides,
Interjected said to Pinkie Pie,
we saw the sun when we were all in Ponyville over a week ago, and it's stuck flying over the Griffins and Quillen and all the other ponies of people living in Piscisa.
"Well, not all of them," Twilight continued. "Napon and the Hippogriff Archipelago sit just at the edge of nighttime. And Prance, Germany, and the Shire are stuck in the pre-morning dusk." Just about every pony, Drake, Stag, and Pony, all, poggled at Twilight for her statement.
"Seriously, how did you figure that out?"
gasped Rainbow Dash. Twilight placed a hoof on her chest in pride. "Judging by the position of the sun in the sky in Nuise Nanuupe, coupled with my diegetic memory of a globe of our planet, I was able to figure out exactly where the divisions of day and night currently fall in Harmonia." Rainbow Dash made a cough that sounded suspiciously like "Ahead!" Twilight decided to ignore it. The stag looked at Twilight with slightly less furrowed eyebrows. "You speak with intelligence, and you do not hesitate. You are not committing falsehood. What is your name?" "Twilight Sparkle." The stag bowed his head lowly. "I bear the honorable name of Fuzzhead." Applejack and Rainbow Dash started to snicker, attempting to smother it with loud coughing fits in their hooves. Fuzzhead gave them a pair of withering looks. "Laugh if you must, but mine is the name of prestige dating back to the age of discord. People, I say this constantly, and I will continue saying this, but only in a ponyfic, people! Only in a ponyfic. Rainbow Dash nodded. Yeah, sorry, pal. With a grin too wide to be considered all politic.
Please, Rainbow Dash,
Fluttershy said stiffly.
leave Mr. Fuzzhead be. He really needs to be tended to.
I thought I said I did not need your help, snapped Fuzzhead.
But why not?
Rarity replied with an edge to her voice.
I thought it was made abundantly clear that this sun is not the sun, and we as a group do not mail in for you to anyone.
It was the will of the world that I should be so felled here, Fuzzhead said with a bowed head. I would rather rot here knowing that I could have injured innocence.
Rainbow Dash, go find the straightest branches you can find and bring them here,
said Fluttershy. There was something in her eyes that was almost akin to the stare that he administered to the wide plains hemilope, some force of strength of will that clamored around the edges of her irises, which somehow inspired obedience despite the cerulean Pegasus' objections. Sure thing, Flutters, she said, before darting off into the trees outside of the circle. Fluttershy turned to Pinkie Pie.
Pinkie, go find some of the vines. We'll need bindings if the split is going to work out.
Will these streamers do the trick?
Pinkie replied, producing a bundle of multicolored streamers from out seemingly nowhere. To Fluttershy's credit, she only blinked and replied with a faint smile.
That will do nicely, actually, if we just stretch them out and then cut them at just the right place.
You seem to belabor the notion that I will let you help me recover, grumbled Fuzzhead.
If I might ask, sir, Twilight cut in, why don't you want any pony to help you with that leg?
Fuzzhead averted his eyes. No, dear, will miss me. I am alone in my herd. So I have taken to being a scout for us.
Us? You mean you're not from Severn?
Fuzzhead met Twilight's eyes. Our ancestors left Severn years ago, taking up this forest as our home, and despite my honorable name, I have long been set aside by my fellow deer, in order to perceive as more useful for my own people. I took to patrolling our borders for any oddities or intruders, and all this time I have not caused harm to any travelers I had good cause to believe were kind at heart, but it did nothing to assuage my treatment by the herd. Fuzzhead's eyes swam with emotion. Please, leave me here to my fate.
What a load of horse manure!
Piped Rainbow Dash, who deposited a small bundle of long straight sticks at Fluttershy and Fuzzhead's hooves. Fluttershy smiled at Rainbow Dash.
Thank you, Dashy.
Before kissing her fiancé on the cheek.
Rainbow Dash's cheeks flushed pink before she perched on a low-hanging branch. Horse manure, you say? Growled Fuzzhead. Are you insulting me in my honor? Rainbow Dash growled.
No, I'm saying that maybe the reason your herd doesn't like you is maybe you weren't giving them reason to. Have you ever thought that maybe your holier-than-thou attitude might get some deers a little testy fuzzy?
Fuzzhead's eyes flashed.
Did you just call me?
Please, stop moving,
Fluttershy said firmly, placing the stag back down onto his side. She had been busy setting the sticks out, determining which ones were best for the brace. Finally, she set her hooves to Fuzzhead's broken leg.
Now, please don't be mad at me,
she said softly.
It's lucky that this was just a dislocated joint, or it'd be a lot less lucky a deer. This will hurt a bit, though.
Twilight knew what Fluttershy was about to do, closing her eyes tightly shut as Fluttershy began to twist her forelegs around Fuzzhead's hind leg. A loud snap filled the air, and Fuzzhead let out a tender scream when the branch had knocked him down, prompting every pony to flatten their ears in alarm, despite the clamp caused over his fins.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Fuzzhead,
pleaded Fluttershy.
But I have to do this to help your recovery.
Why? Gasped Fuzzhead, blinking back tears of pain. I tried to charge you. Do I not deserve your resentment? Why help some deer who tried to hurt you?
Because you didn't know any better,
replied Fluttershy, with a kind and loving smile.
Just like everyone who has ever tried to hurt anyone else ever. Some ponies would hurt others because they don't see any other way of dealing with them. But there is never a reason not to be kind. If we don't show kindness even to those who would hurt us, then we're really no better, are we? It's only through kindness that we can change a bad pony's heart and make them see what it's like to be nice.
Twilight looked at Fluttershy in wonder. She knew that Fluttershy had a very gentle heart, but had previously assumed the sheer depth of her goodness to be simple naivete. But knowing now that Fluttershy had faced bullying in the past and remained relatively stable, if somewhat withdrawn, Twilight realized just how deeply Fluttershy's loving nature ran. The butter-colored mare was so utterly optimistic and her fellow harmonians that it was infectious. Just listening to Fluttershy's words made Twilight think that perhaps all the problems she ever had with any pony at Canterlot could be solved with simple kindness. Maybe even Twilight was brought back out of her reverie by Fluttershy placing her saddle cell on the ground next to Fuzzhead.
Now, Mr. Fuzzhead, I'm going to need you to lift up your back leg for a moment while I place my saddle cell down under your hoof. I'm going to need some room to apply the bindings for the splint.
Looking at Fuzzhead, Twilight was pleasantly surprised to see she was not the only one affected by Fluttershy's small monologue. The stag was giving her a look of sparkly-eyed awe, lifting his back leg with gritted teeth, as Fluttershy nosed her saddle cell under Fuzzhead's raised hoof, making certain that it was steady before nodding at the stag to rest his hoof.
Now, Rarity, I'm going to need you to help me with the bindings while I place the sticks in place.
Anything for you, darling, smiled Rarity, taking Piggy's streamers in her Dwemer shimmer and stretching them out taut, comparing the lengths and wordlessly deciding which one would be best suited for the task.
Well,
The Alabaster Unicorn broke her silence.
I don't think that green is very suitable against the brown of your coat, Mr. Fuzzhead. Red is perhaps rather inappropriate in lieu of the injury you sustained. Yellow is not the present mixed with brown in the slightest, believe me. Pink, perhaps, or blue.
Rarity levitated the two remaining streamers hesitantly in front of her face, and Amethyst's eyebrow quirked upwards pensitively. For Polly's sakes, Rarity, it don't matter what the color of it is, so long as it holds! Applejack interjected irritably. Rarity recoiled at Applejack's raised voice, but chuckled sheepishly as he set the pink streamer aside. Fluttershy had been setting the stakes parallel to Fuzzhead's dislocated leg, before turning to face Twilight.
Twilight, do you think you can levitate the sticks in place for Rarity in her bindings?
Of course, Fluttershy, Twilight replied smilingly, the sticks raising up in a bright pink glow, hovering in place alongside Fuzzhead's leg. Twilight took care to see that the longer stick, with a fork at the end of the leg, was the one set inside the dislocated leg, to act as a brace to distribute the weight away from Fuzzhead's bad limb. A smaller, shorter stick hovered in place just under the stag's hoof. At a nod from Twilight, Rarity began to wind the blue streamers taut around the branches of either side of Fuzzhead's leg, making certain to bind the three branches to each other, and to the stag's leg with the streamers, the two long branches acting as a brace, while the twig at the bottom served as a support to prevent unnecessary weight around Fuzzhead's leg. Fluttershy took a step back from her handiwork, offering Fuzzhead a small smile, which he faintly returned.
Looks really good, Fluttershy,
commented Twilight sincerely.
Just give me a moment.
The entire splint, which Fluttershy had vanished, and began to sparkle with what looked like bright pink stars, branches, and streamers. When the twinkles cleared away, it became clear that the branches now held a cobalt sheen to them. Rarity's eyes, smudged with the running makeup, widened in wonder at the magic that had been worked alongside with the eyes of Applejack and Spike.
I thermagically bonded the streamers and branches together, so that the splint will hold much better,
explained Twilight.
Really?
Replied Fluttershy, with mild astonishment.
Thank you, Twilight.
She returned to face Fuzzhead again.
Now, Mr. Fuzzhead, if it's okay with you, do you think you could test your weight on the splint? Carefully now.
Looking tentatively at the splint that the ponies around him had forged for him, Fuzzhead hesitantly lifted himself onto his three good legs, while keeping as much weight off his splintered leg as he could. Slowly, he lifted it off Fluttershy's saddle cell and gingerly let it settle onto the forest floor. After a few moments of testing how much weight he could felt comfortable putting on the splint, he gave each mare in turn a small smile.
I shall be able to walk again with this, although I will not be charging anyone down with speed until I recovered fully, said Fuzzhead. But I thank each and every one of you.
Be sure to keep your full weight off of that until you feel comfortable on it.
Fluttershy insisted.
Even when the splint comes off, you should still be gentle on that leg and wait until your muscles have fully recuperated.
I will bear that in mind, Fuzzhead replied. Your kindness truly knows no bounds.
Fluttershy.
The buttery-colored Pegasus replied.
My name is Fluttershy.
Twilight smiled at the ordinarily timid mare, and for the first time since the Hemaloop, saw the strength of Fluttershy's heart. There had been many times in the trek across the stagnating planet when Twilight almost regretted roping Fluttershy into this horrible business. The Whisperer had proven to be timid, and all too ready to flee from danger, or the perception of such that there were times that she seemed to be more of a load on the party than of an aid. In the start, Twilight perhaps thought that bringing along Fluttershy helped to fill out the roster of 6 ponies, as Twilight recalled Queen Celestia's words in one of their private lessons.
There was a time, my dearest Twilight, when harmony was thought to be lost from our world. The very heavens above shone with the destruction of scores of worlds colliding with one another, and with the stars in the firmament itself, and on Harmonia itself. Order and peace were almost forgotten for unmeasured many years. Elysium would have been a mercy. But 6 stood against discord, equipped with harmony's implements, eager to see the dawn of a new era of peace and love. I always hoped that there would be 6 pony hearts so eager when the elements of harmony are needed once more.
Now that she thought back to that day, Twilight Sparkle realized that the Queen of the Nightclub Marathon would have been aware of the return of Nightmare Moon for growth centuries, if not from the moment that Forget-Me-Not made her prophecy the year after the Night Queen's banishment. If the Queen were truly involved in the creation of the elements of harmony, then they surely would be the most knowledgeable of the methods of activating them. Loyalty, honesty, generosity, kindness, laughter, and magic. The 6 elements of harmony. Each of these 6 mares had to represent each one of them. It was going to involve their friendships, synchronized between each other, all at once, to overthrow the miasma holds on the Night Queen's mind, once and for all, annihilating Nightmare Moon for all time. Returning to the outside world, Twilight focused on Fluttershy as she closely inspected Fuzzhead's splint.
Fluttershy?
Yellow Mare looked at Twilight.
Yes, Twilight?
Twilight smiled.
You really are the kindest mare I ever met. I'm honored to call you my friend.
Fluttershy smiled back.
Thank you, Twilight. That was very sweet of you.
She leaned down to pick up her shadow cell by the buckle, withdrawing an alarm as it lit up in a pink Dwimmer shimmer. Twilight wincing at Fluttershy's alarm, the pink light around the shadow cell dissipating in an instant. The shadow cell snapping open the instant it hit the ground. The shards of Fluttershy's element of harmony spilling out along with the other contents of her shadow cell. Twilight barely had time to sheepishly smile at Fluttershy before a bright green glow began to emit from the shards of rock on the frosty, leafy ground. A 4th element was activated. Woot.